In January 2019, WeWork was worth $47 billion. 6 months later, it filed for an IPO that would have made it one of the largest public offerings in American history. And then, in just 6 weeks, it all collapsed. $40 billion in value, gone, not because of a recession, not because of a competitor, because one document told the truth about a company that had been lying to itself for a decade. This is the story of WeWork, and it starts with one of the most dangerous things in business, a founder who believes his own hype. You're watching The Fallen Empire. Adam Neumann was born on a kibbutz in Israel in 1979. Tall, electric, and pathologically charismatic. He moved to New York in his early 20s with almost nothing. His first venture was a company that sold baby clothes with built-in knee pads. It failed. His second was a women's shoe line with collapsible heels. Also failed. Most people would recalibrate. Neumann doubled down. In 2010, he and architect Miguel McKelvey leased a single floor in a Soho building, subdivided it into shared workspaces, and called it WeWork. The timing was perfect. The freelance economy was exploding. Startups needed flexibility. Traditional offices were expensive, soulless, and locked into 5-year leases. WeWork offered something different. Beautiful spaces with craft beer on tap, community events, and a month-to-month membership. It felt less like renting a desk and more like joining a club. The model worked instantly. Within a year, they had 3 locations. By 2014, WeWork was in 6 cities. The membership was growing 40% quarter over quarter, and the company was valued at $5 billion. That's when Neumann's narrative machine kicked into high gear. He stopped calling WeWork a real estate company. He started calling it a technology platform, a community company. At one point, and this actually happened, he called it a state of consciousness. Investors didn't blink because the growth was intoxicating. 50 locations, 100, 200. Revenue was doubling every year. Neumann told Masayoshi Son, the billionaire founder of SoftBank, that he wanted to be the world's first trillionaire. Son loved it. In 2017, he visited WeWork headquarters. The meeting was scheduled for an hour. It lasted 12 minutes. Son committed $4.4 billion. 12 minutes, $4 billion. That single investment valued WeWork at $20 billion and made Adam Neumann a paper billionaire overnight. But here's where it gets insane. SoftBank's investment triggered a feeding frenzy. Every major VC fund wanted in. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, T. Rowe Price, Fidelity, they all piled on. The valuation climbed to $30 billion, then $40, then $47 billion. WeWork was now worth more than real estate giants that owned actual buildings, companies with decades of revenue and thousands of properties. WeWork owned nothing. It leased everything. And that was the problem nobody wanted to talk about. What SoftBank didn't scrutinize, or chose to ignore, was the financial model underneath. WeWork signed long-term leases on buildings, sometimes 10 to 15 years. It then renovated those buildings at enormous cost and rented out desks on flexible short-term memberships. All the risk sat on WeWork's side of the ledger. In a booming economy, the buildings stay full. In a downturn, members cancel their month-to-month memberships and WeWork is stuck paying landlords for empty floors with money it doesn't have. For every dollar WeWork earned in 2018, it spent $2. The company lost $1.9 billion that year alone. But nobody cared because the story was bigger than the spreadsheet. Between 2017 and 2019, Neumann went on an expansion spree that made WeWork look less like a business and more like a vanity project with a corporate card. WeLive, co-living apartments that almost nobody wanted. WeGrow, a private school run by his wife Rebecca, based on what she described as Kabbalah-inspired education philosophy. They acquired Meetup, the event platform. They bought a wave pool company called Wavegarden. Neumann himself purchased multiple buildings and then leased them back to WeWork, paying himself as both landlord and CEO. He even trademarked the word "we" personally and charged his own company $5.9 million for the right to use it. The board eventually forced him to return the money. But the fact that he tried, and almost got away with it, tells you everything about how little oversight existed. Then came August 14th, 2019. WeWork filed its S-1, the prospectus every company must publish before going public. The market had been waiting for it. What they got was one of the most alarming financial documents in Silicon Valley history. The losses were staggering. $1.9 billion in 2018, accelerating into 2019. But worse than the numbers was the governance. Neumann's shares carried 20 votes compared to 1 vote for regular shareholders. He had sole authority to appoint his replacement, and if he died or became incapacitated, his wife Rebecca would choose the next CEO. He had borrowed $740 million against his own WeWork shares. Multiple family members were on the payroll. The company's definition of community-adjusted EBITDA, a financial metric they literally invented, excluded almost every real cost of doing business. Wall Street analysts called it one of the most egregious attempts at financial manipulation they had ever seen in a public filing. The Wall Street Journal published a devastating investigation. Tequila fueled all-hands meetings, private jets where the cannabis smoke was so thick that the crew refused to fly the return leg, a company culture that celebrated excess while the cleaning staff earned near minimum wage. The IPO valuation was slashed from $47 billion to $20 billion, then 15, then 10. Banks started walking away. The roadshow was canceled. The IPO was dead. SoftBank, now staring at billions in potential losses, demanded Neumann resign as CEO. He fought it, but when SoftBank threatened to withdraw a critical rescue package, Neumann had no leverage. He stepped down in September 2019. His severance package, negotiated while the company was in freefall, was worth $1.7 billion. $1.7 billion for the man who nearly destroyed the company. 2,400 employees were laid off in the weeks that followed. Office cleaners and receptionists, the people who actually made WeWork function, lost their jobs with minimal notice, while the founder walked away with generational wealth. SoftBank pumped another $9.5 billion into WeWork to keep it alive. Masayoshi Son publicly called it the worst investment of his career. But the bleeding didn't stop. WeWork's new CEO, Sandeep Mathrani, was brought in to do what Neumann never could, run the company like an actual business. He closed underperforming locations. He renegotiated leases. He cut the headcount by more than half. For a while, it looked like WeWork might survive. Then COVID hit. Office buildings around the world emptied overnight. The one thing WeWork sold, shared physical workspace, was the one thing nobody wanted anymore. Remote work became the default. Companies canceled memberships in waves. The company limped along, went public via SPAC in October 2021 at a valuation of $9 billion, an 80% decline from its peak. The stock continued to fall. By mid-2023, shares were down 98%. In November 2023, WeWork filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Here's the thing that makes this story genuinely painful. The product wasn't terrible. People actually liked working in WeWork spaces. The core idea, flexible, beautiful, community-driven offices, was sound. It still is. What killed WeWork wasn't the concept. It was the unchecked ego of a founder who believed his own mythology, a board that refused to say no, and a venture capital ecosystem so drunk on growth that it forgot to ask the most basic question in business: how do you actually make money? And the final twist, the one that makes this story feel less like a cautionary tale and more like a broken system. In 2022, Andreessen Horowitz gave Adam Neumann $350 million for his next company, Flow, a residential real estate startup. The man who incinerated $40 billion in investor value got funded again within 3 years. Because in Silicon Valley, narrative is currency, and Adam Neumann might be the greatest storyteller who ever lived. That's WeWork, an empire built on charisma, funded by blind faith, and brought down by a single document that told the truth. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to The Fallen Empire. Every empire has a story. Most have an ending.